it is, it is unwise to believe that there's not going to be housing where canes previously grew in this country. I grew up in a cane field. Mr. Speaker, sir, Madam Deputy Speaker, I also would wish to remind the opposition leader that in the story told by Cicero, mentioned by the leader of the opposition, the one with Damocles, the sword of Damocles. Let me keep you focused. The point was that, and the bigger point was that, with all the power in the world and all the wealth in the world, at the end of the day, those positions, they're often men who are coming for you. And that such power and such wealth may not necessarily bring happiness, and that it is better to be a person of great virtue and good virtue. And I believe that most of us come to this house with a desire to do virtuous things. I think about our housing situation, sir, in much this way. It is a difficult thing, I think, now to be a minister of housing, and the truth is many people in Barbados want houses, and this has been the case for a number of years. I've had the good fortune of being associated with the ministry that I now lead for a number of years, and persons have been asking for housing for a tremendous part of that period. We have to find a solution to the housing problem, and I trust that we will be able to do so in a way that is balanced as we go forward. I support this resolution, Madam Deputy Speaker. I support it entirely because I do know we have to have housing solutions, and I do know that solution has to be one that is balanced. Like the honourable members who spoke before me, I too visited Bullins. I visited the site. It's a very nice site. And the truth is that for a number of years, it hasn't actually been in agriculture. And I'm not saying that all land that is not in agriculture needs now to go to housing, but this particular plot has not been in agriculture. We're not sacrificing any land or any food, denying Barbadians the capacity to be food sufficient. The plants, we are advised that were there. There used to be a plant nursery and other things there. Those plants are still alive. They've been moved to another location. And that we are maintaining and regarding and respecting that, to me, is a credit to the government. I would want to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, again, that I really have a lot of respect for Barbadian farmers. In the house that I grew up in the Pine, at the bottom of the hill where I lived, on the top of the hill, the government of the day granted to the Rastafarian community what was, I think, about a half acre to grow food. The Rastas at the time, many of them were in agriculture, were despised, rejected. People said the worst things about them because they chose to spend some time growing food. Rastafari had a lot of things right at a time when they were criticized for it. But on top of that hill, there is still the food being grown and a certain degree for self-sufficiency. So I have a great, profound respect for the struggles of the people who chose to be in agriculture for a significant part of their lives. The Honourable Member for St. Philip South, I believe, as Minister of Agriculture, is doing a fantastic job to make sure that the farmers of Barbados get a fair share. And I say so conscious of the fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, that for many people who own agricultural land, many of them are making a choice. Many persons are choosing not to go into agriculture. I've seen the efforts of the government to keep people in agriculture when their personal choice is not so to do. And again, that is also to the credit of the government. And of course, I believe that we have to have a balanced approach in terms of how we build out as we go forward. But I do support this resolution. I think when we have clinic, I have clinic every week, Mr. Speaker, sir, Madam Deputy Speaker, or as often as I can. And the question that is posed to me most often by my constituents is, can you help me get a house? And it is something that I believe that the government has to look at, and the truth is that the buildup of housing has been slow and steady, but it has happened over years. This is not something that happened yesterday. The fact that Barbadians want housing has been happening now gradually over a period of time for years. And they asked me, sir, is the government building houses? And I'm sure that the Honourable Member for Christchurch South has those questions too. Persons asking for housing. A serious government has to commit itself to resolving the issues of the day. And as I said, Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe that there has to be balance. We have to balance our desire to remain food sufficient and self-sufficient, but I must also remind this chamber that to be food sufficient does not necessarily mean you grow everything. In a region where we have, and it's a fact, there are lands in our adjoining neighbors that are perhaps more fertile than ours. Barbados has to be able to feed itself in times of crises. But I'm just saying that the relationship that we build out with our neighbors could help us have a comprehensive plan that allows us to do what we need to do to house our Barbadian citizenry while we still are able to eat. But the people who come to me on Wednesday evenings ask me primarily about housing. Can I get a house? Can you help me with a house? Is the government building houses? And the truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am happy to see that the minister responsible for housing, the Honourable Member for St. George South, has gone about his task with such diligence and is indeed returning results to the people of Barbados as it relates to housing. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we also have to recognize that in a climate crisis, emergency housing is going to be a big deal. The Honourable Member for St. George South spoke of the fire in Wellington Street, the city, that we were able to offer some housing solutions for. The member for the city and myself, we spent the night there. The Honourable Member for St. Michael East came to the scene. We saw the fire. It was perhaps the biggest fire I've ever seen. We're going to have situations where we have to respond to fires. We've seen that early July, for the last few years, we're getting weather that is unprecedented. Brought us Beryl, brought us Elsa. We also have to be in a position to house persons as a result of these changing climate events caused by a climate crisis that small island developing states are desperately fighting to get their share recognized, because the international world does not choose to recognize that they're guilty of causing most of these problems that are being faced by small island developing states. But we have to find housing solutions for the most vulnerable. There's no other way to look at it. We have to find housing solutions for the most vulnerable. I know enough to know that there is a relationship between food insecurity and housing. We know that. If we are serious about tackling food insecurity, we also have to be talking about housing. A man or a woman who is unhoused is more likely to face food insecurity. And we therefore have to build affordable housing, because it must be a case where having a house does not deprive one of the capacity to be able to have a meal either. We have to be able to build affordable housing, and I am happy to see that the government is doing what it has to do to build affordable housing so that the average Barbadian can own a house. Madam Deputy Speaker, after that fire in Wellington Street, we were able to house a number of families in housing. And I've been in a number of conversations with the Minister of Housing about us being able to build out serious emergency housing facilities for people. I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition said he came in here to talk politics. I came to talk about the people and to do the people's business. And I must tell you, I'm a lot tired. I spent the last few nights at the hospital with my mother. I'm a lot tired. And so I am in a mood now just to deal with facts. Some of us have to be the adult in the room at certain times. The number of persons who are desirous of housing in Barbados, Madam Deputy Speaker, is happening because there are a number of phenomena influencing this. The truth is that there was a time when you could have a whole lot of Barbadians living in the same household. Around the same time that we were an agrarian society, you could have a lot of Barbadians living in the same household. As people become more economically independent, they want their own space. We can't tell Barbadians that they can't have a house. So people want to be able to have housing. So what you're saying, in a sense, is a rise in people's capacity to own housing because of the fact that they have been economically enfranchised. And the truth is that people believe, with the trajectory of the country and with the government, that they can own a house in this time because many people lost faith a few years ago. So we expect that more people are going to come forward asking for housing because more people believe that they can own a house because more people now are working. More people are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. And at the end of the day, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is what we came to politics for, I believe. To be able to offer people a better standard of living. And one of those things must be a house. It must be a house. You know, I was on the block one day when I was living in the Pine. I spent a lot of time on the block, you know. I'm a real block man. Young man for Christ himself knows me well, so he knows that it's true. I'm a real block man. I spend a lot of time on the block. A lot of the education that you get on the streets when you grow up in certain communities. And I remember some older men saying to us as a group of young boys that we think being true to ourselves and to the Pine is to stay in the Pine. But to be true to ourselves and to be true to our mothers, particularly our mothers, because at the time many of us did not live with our fathers. But to be true to our mothers, the real testimony of whether you are being true to yourself and to your roots is not to stay there, but to be able to move out, get a little education, move out, take your family out so that you can own something, because at the time, nobody owned any of those Pine houses. And if it is true that we count housing solutions as the houses that were built in the 70s and the 60s and so on, those were meant to be rented permanently at the time. So the children who grew up in those housing solutions also are looking for houses. So that there are a number of people who are housed in rental accommodation who are also looking for houses. We have to be able to satisfy that need. And I believe that we are on a trajectory so to do. But the older guy said, if you want to be true to yourself, you've got to find a way out. And once you found a way out, you then have to make a way for other people to get out. But never disrespect where it is that you come from. Madam Deputy Speaker, I grew up in a cane ground, cane field, as did many of us. If we ask, and we go back a few years, a few decades, you will see that many of us where we live in the heights and the terraces was agricultural land. Cane was planted there. When I was a boy, Madam Deputy Speaker, what is now Fort George Heights used to be land where cows and sheep would feed. And we would leave the Pine and go up there because you could find all kind of dunk trees and different trees. And we would go up there to get those things. And animals used to be there. Most of us who reside where we resided where agriculture was. It is a crying shame now to come and call all sin and all men who do it sinners, when the house probably that we also live in was agricultural land. Probably. We need to recognize that the only way a country can develop is if you have a balanced trajectory and a balanced growth. And that there's a seriousness that must be brought to the conversation that I think is a bit above politics. But in relation to the children, we have to have a new deal for children. If we are to be able to build facilities for children, children need places to play and so on. A lot of the facilities that were meant for children, particularly in the urban corridors, were small. The land that is being made available at Bullins allows us to build a proper, modern facility. And I don't only mean modern in relation to the physicalness of the building, but in relation to how you think about housing children, the programs that are going to be going there, and the space. The other thing was that in many cases, you would want to separate children. Sterling, you'd want to separate children many times from other places, other housing developments. And when you did not do that, you ended up with small little housing facilities, as we had at Campwood, I think it was in St. Philip. We had at Sears Court in Christchurch. We had in Haynesville, where you might have a children's facility, but you do not have physical space for the children to be able to play. And that if we are going to rethink that, because modern thinking tells us that if you're going to build out facilities for children, you need to do so with space. And the facility at Bullins allows us to right a wrong, because most of the facilities that were built, look at them, except for the ones that used to be in the more rural areas. They were small. This allows us to build a modern facility where children can play and have fun and so on. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is currently about 100 children residing in care in Barbados. It fluctuates, but it's about 100. The facility at Bullins will house the adolescent children that are primarily now being housed at, I should say homed, really, because it's not just a house, at what was Fars, the Marina Brewster property at Fars. Most of those children will now go to the property at Bullins. And we will have a modern facility for those children, because I believe the children in care deserve the best. You know, I have said that it is one of the things that I intend to do is to have a story if the person's allowed, because people believe if you grow up in care that you're not capable of achieving anything. And that there are a number of children who grew up in care facilities who've gone on to do amazing things. And that is why, Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe that we have to put in place the proper facilities so that children who grow up in care can go on to do even greater things. When we consider Bullins, and when we look at the trajectory we want to build out for children in Barbados, Madam Deputy Speaker, the idea that we needed a facility as modern and as relevant as the facility that is being built at Bullins by the Barbados Children's Trust is something that we could only have dreamt of. And we are building a state-of-the-art facility for children who are put in care, who therefore would be some of our most vulnerable children, at zero cost to the government of Barbados. It is at zero cost to the government of Barbados. And I'm saying, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I believe the benefits will be triple what people anticipate from these facilities, because this is the kind of facility now, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I had the wherewithal so to do, I would be building these facilities all over the place, not only for children, but for persons with disabilities, for the elderly, and so on. Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe that in the social sector, the government, if I were to use the opposition leader's analogy, the government would be the mouse that is giving birth to a mountain when it comes to what it is that we are doing in the social sector. The truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have to be able to do these things. We have to be able to do these things. I trust that the children who will now move to Bullins will appreciate and enjoy the facility. They will appreciate and they will enjoy the space, Madam Deputy Speaker, that would allow them to have a productive life. The other thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to say and to offer comfort to the Maria Holder Trust, who would have been involved in FARS, is to let them know, because I know they're listening, that we intend to keep that space for children. And that we will have facilities, different facilities for children there, but we intend to keep that space for children at FARS, so that they do not have to worry about what we intend to do with the space at FARS. Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe that these are important conversations. The other thing is, Madam Deputy Speaker, again, I want to thank the Minister of Housing, because as part of that emergency housing conversation, I anticipate that very soon we will be having a conversation about some of the work that we are doing together to resolve a social problem. We know as well that there are some persons that we know that have taken residence with the ministry at the Clygallop shelter. Madam Deputy Speaker, that we have to repair that facility. We need to find a new facility mostly for those men who are there, Madam Deputy Speaker. Because I believe that regardless of a person's social circumstance at a time, that they need to be treated with dignity and decorum. In much the same way, Madam Deputy Speaker, that you reminded this chamber that many children for years, not today, who did not have at school were given very quietly to and treated with dignity. Because dignity is the point. And I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the point being raised, ultimate point, raised by Cicero in the Sword of Damocles story, is that decency and integrity matter more at the end of the day than wealth and all these things. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have also identified a new facility. You would recall that when we brought the Child Protection Bill, that we said we were going to build a secure treatment facility to allow us to work with those children who need some extra special attention. I'm pleased to announce that the Child Care Board is in the process of securing a building, and that tomorrow we will sign the payment agreement for that building, so that we would then have that secure treatment facility, keeping the promise that we made when we brought that bill. And that is important, because it allows us to treat to the children who need treating to the most in a way, sir, ma'am, that is not punitive, but allows us to deal with them at the core and deal with the issues that they are facing. I anticipate, again, that we are going to have significant benefit. On that note, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to encourage those who give to help us build out more child care facilities. I believe that Barbados has reached a point where we are seeing the benefits of government-run facilities, but it could be a private-public partnership, much like some of these houses that we're building. And if you can build out more child care facilities, it gives a lot of women, young women, particularly vulnerable women, the opportunity to go and to work, while the government takes care of their children at a subsidized rate. We need to build more. I suspect that the cost to the government would be tremendously outdone by the benefits to the government and to the country by allowing these women to work. Madam Chair, Madam Deputy, I believe very strongly we're now into the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. I believe very strongly that we have to build a society that allows us to respect women. Most of the people who come to me on Wednesday evenings, I don't know what the application percentage is at the Ministry of Housing, but most of them are women. A lot of women who are coming forward and trying to own a piece of the rock, who have been trying for years. I think what we are doing here empowers women. And that the Prime Minister is always saying that we have to complete the circle of enfranchisement. The opposition leader asked the question I thought he was asking in jest. Who is being empowered when we build these houses? The question, I don't know if I misheard, but I believe the question was who is being enfranchised? You also said enfranchised. When we build these houses. The answer is a very simple answer. It is the poor and vulnerable, particularly the women who come to see us on Wednesdays when we host clinic. The women of this country, the young men of this country who want to own a house, those are the ones being enfranchised by what the Honourable Member for St. George South has brought here today. The point that I am making, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that no matter how I look at this thing, and I've looked at this from every angle, I can see no place where there is fault. I support what the Honourable Member for St. George South has brought before this House. I say so, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I think this is a serious thing, you know. There are a number of women in Barbados who are raising children on their own. That is why I spoke about us building out more housing facilities. Some of them in situations where they're being ill-treated by men. And I'm speaking, recognizing that this is a period where we have to be serious about gender-based violence. A lot of them are asking for facilities to be able to raise their children safely, that they can own and afford. We are tackling a multiplicity of social problems when we build out these facilities in situations where people have space and they can play, and children who grow up in a children's home are looking not at a cramped up yard like they did at Say's Court or at Campwood, but at a facility that has a huge space, and they look out and they see what Barbadians consider to be decent housing, because we have to treat children who are in these most vulnerable circumstances well, and this allows us to do just that. Madam Deputy Speaker, so while the opposition leader speaks about the social problems that having these circumstances may cause, I see that there's also social benefits. And I have been the first to come to Parliament, and I have said many times that what we built in the Pine and in Haynesville and so on were social solutions, but without the appropriate infrastructure for play, then you could have social problems. And I know that the Honourable Member for St. George South is taking these things into consideration. I have seen the plans. I've heard the conversations. I do believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we have to be balanced in the approach that we take to housing. Madam Deputy Speaker, I will close on this. I never planned to be even as long as I've been. In my constituency, I have responsibility now for the grotto, for the constituents in the grotto, for the people in the grotto, because most of them don't actually vote in St. Michael South. They're not my constituents in that sense, but that there are people who live in St. Michael South, and I take charge for them as I do for any other person, any set of persons. And they're some of the nicest people that I have met. I must tell you, I appreciate particularly Prime Minister Andrea and the team who are doing good work in keeping the grotto up to date. But I would recall before the 2018 election, there were tiles blowing in the grotto. The tiles started lifting, the cupboards were falling apart. The pipes, the plumbing went bad in the grotto. And that slowly we are seeing the government trying to fix some of these problems, but they would tell you that they have a number of problems because of the original build of the grotto. The grotto was rushed before the 2018 election to put people into those houses before the government of the day. The honourable leaders of the opposition, his government. No, it's the leader of the opposition is his government. They put people in. They put people into the grotto before they fix the problems in the grotto. We want to talk about sin. Let us talk about sin. They built the grotto at an enormous price that they could never get back. Tell us about who profited then. Tell us who profited then.
Enrichment is what is it? Enrichment.
Huh? In the agricultural station and in the grotto. Yes. Tell us who profited then.
That was agriculture.
But they built out the grotto, Honourable Leader of the Opposition. I know you may not know because you were safe in the bosom of the Labour Party. No, I have to take him at his word. He said he didn't know. But they built.
Who was enriched?
They built the grotto. I don't have the dollar value. I suspect the Honourable Member for St. George South could tell you. $650 a square foot
Corruption.
for lifting tiles,
Corruption.
Order, please.
for broken sinks and pipes,
Oh no.
for falling cupboards and doors and windows not staying on their hinges at $650 a square foot,
Oh no.
and would want to tell me about sin.
Oh no. That's iniquity, not sin. That's iniquity.
Well, I must remind, if we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves,
And the truth is not in him.
and the truth is not in him. Madam Deputy Speaker, even today when I visit the grotto, I still have to find myself calling the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to fix these problems, many of them structural problems. Talk about the sin, man. Many of them structural problems. They have to throw garbage from the top window, or they got to walk down the stairs with the garbage. Huh? The reality is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that if they had done it once, you could say that it was a mistake. Or perhaps, as is keeping with the government of the day then, his government, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition's government, incompetence. But that was what they repeated after they did it at Valerie.
Oh dear.
Right next to my constituency too, in St. Michael, South Central. And then, because, listen, the audacity of the opposition has no bounds. After that, taking cameras to show people the faults in Valerie, when they built the Valerie,
Oh dear. What a terrible group of people.
to put it on social media and to say, look at what the government is doing, instead of saying, oh my gosh, look at what we did, that Democratic Labour Party government, look at what we did to the people.
Oh dear. Oh no. No, no.
So when I look at Valerie, and when I look at the grotto, and I see good Barbadian people suffering because of the facilities that was built, when I watched that we have to go there time and time again and try to fix what the Democratic Labour Party did to the people, I find it a little bit difficult, with as much admiration that I have for the leader, to sit here and be lectured about who's sinning and who ain't sinning. Because at the end of the day, the greatest injury done to people in housing was under the Democratic Labour Party. Talk about the number of houses that were built and grass was going through them all over Barbados.
My entire parish line, St. George, all kinds of everywhere.
Let us talk. If you're going to have a conversation, let us talk. I know that if you want to come and tell me about anything in my eye, you got to first take off that which is in yours. Talk about the number of houses all over Barbados that, again, people who went in face the same situation, because they were built, many people can go in them, same cover problem, windows, doors. That is the reality. So we have now gone about trying to do serious business for the people of Barbados, for the women who have built this country. I know what it is to watch women carry water upon their head, man, from the standpipe. I know what it is to have to bathe at 1, 2 for a number of years. I ain't getting into whether he knows or doesn't know. I know that there were many women who had to bathe at standpipes, who dream of owning a house. Are we to deny them? Are we to deny them because we believe that this parliament is a place where we should come and say we came to talk politics and not about the people? Madam Deputy Speaker, are we to deny the children a proper facility where modern thinking tells us that you need to build smaller facilities in terms of the number of children with larger spaces so that they too have a decent life and dignity? in this country. So I am asking myself, what is it that we are really disagreeing with? It can't be what we propose to do for the people. It cannot be that the government is not trying its best to work with the farmers. And I've heard the minister speak on numerous occasions about his relationship with them and his work with them. I have a lot of respect for Barbadian farmers. I'm telling you, on the hill where I live, permit me to say, Aimoro, Ayambo, Ayaz, all the Rasta men who were criticized as farmers when I was young. Most of the farmers I knew were dreads. So I have a lot of respect for them. I would never do anything to disrespect them or their legacy. But if we have land that is not being used in agriculture, that could be used to advance the interests of the poor men and women of this country, the most vulnerable children, if we recognize that Barbados was once predominantly a land of agriculture, and that the houses that most of us live in was probably agricultural land, I would advise, I don't know, but I would advise the Honourable Member for Christchurch South to check and see if that was agricultural land too. I don't know. I know where I grew up was of cane ground. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just wish to say as I close that I support what is before this honourable chamber. I wish to say that I support what is before this chamber. I wish to say that I support the efforts of the member for St. George South. I wish to say that in him and in his work, along with the member for Christchurch West, the work that they're doing, I see hope for the poor and for the most vulnerable. And I close again by asking and answering the same question that the leader of the opposition posed, I hope in jest. Who is it that is being enfranchised by what is before the House? It is the people of this country. Yeah. For those few words, Madam Deputy.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I also wish to join this debate to make my contribution to the resolution in respect of the lands at Holders Hill in St. James. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it is necessary for me to go back, because in this honourable chamber, administration after administration, governments, whether you're in government or whether you're in opposition, we've had to grapple with this whole issue of whether or not lands should be acquired for agricultural purposes or whether land should be acquired for public housing. Mr. Speaker, there is no secret whatsoever that Barbados, and I say that giving credit to all those who serve in town and country planning departments, that Barbados has always had a physical development plan. And the physical development plan of Barbados has always been to set out the orderly development of Barbados. And I don't think that there's anyone within this chamber or outside of this chamber who will condemn all the work that those professionals have done to ensure we maintain the orderly development of our society. Madam Deputy Speaker, the issue at hand relates to the resolution and the fact that the government and the honourable member for St. George South has brought the resolution to this chamber to obviously acquire lands or to vest lands to ensure that we can have appropriate housing solutions. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for St. Michael South spoke to it, and it is a fact. There is a demand for housing in Barbados. And what the government is doing is simply responding, as a responsible government ought to do, to the demands of persons who are asking for housing. And if there is a significant demand for housing, and the honourable member for St. George South comes to the chamber, having cleared the cabinet for the resolution to come here, to provide housing solutions, then I think it is simply a case of the government responding to the people of Barbados who want to have appropriate housing solutions. And therefore, what is before us is the Billings Agriculture Station. And the issue, as I have been told, that the Billings Agriculture Station has been closed now for a long time. I believe it was not closed under this Barbados Labour Party administration. It was closed during the Democratic Labour Party administration. The Billings Agriculture Station. So that when we come to this parliament and we want to suggest that agricultural lands were taken out of production by this Barbados Labour Party government, the record should reflect that it is this Barbados Labour Party administration that came in and found the lands in an idle state. And that is a statement of fact, as I've been told. The second issue related to it is that the Billings Agriculture Station moved away from agriculture production for a number of years. And I'm further advised by people who live down that area, and you know I spent a little time on the West Coast having worked there, and they told me that at one stage it moved from what we would call the production of produce, and it moved to flowers, I believe a lot of flowers in the area. And that too collapsed. So that you have land that otherwise would have been in production, not been in agriculture production for several years, and what the government has come today to do is to say, look, it is lying idle, there's a demand for housing, it has not been used for many years, it has not contributed to agriculture production in the country, and as a result, the government has decided that they are going to provide some housing solutions there. Now, of course, a government that, and certainly this government, does not operate like a banana republic. There are procedures that you have to follow. In other words, you will have a Minister of Agriculture who will have to provide comments. If it is an issue of change of use, then that has to be processed by the respective government departments. And it's not that a minister can go in there and say, I want this land and it has to be for agriculture, because we don't operate like a banana republic. We're not that. You go through the processes and you allow the lands and the decisions regarding the lands to come through from the professionals. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is where it has to be a point of departure. Now, there are other people, private owners of land, who would apply for change of use to develop housing projects in Barbados, and they will go through the procedures. And when they are given permission for change of use for agricultural land, I don't hear the hue and cry in the public domain. And therefore, when a government, as an act or an instrument of social policy, decides that it is necessary to provide solutions, there's always this hue and cry. If it is good for the goose, I am told it should be good for the gander. And that is where we are. But we can't have in a society, and if you forgive me, Madam Deputy Speaker, but when you go through St. Thomas, I see a lot of developments, a lot of housing program going up there in St. Thomas, not owned by the government of Barbados, but a private developer. When you go to St. Philip, you see a number of private companies building houses and those who have built houses within that facility, responding again to the housing, the request for housing. So this issue has always grappled governments, and this issue will continue. But the issue for us is that we are not taking lands that were currently under production in agriculture and removing it from agriculture production for housing. Idle lands, nothing done, probably for more than 10 years on the land or even more. And obviously, in response to the housing solution, we have to make the change. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, it caused me to go to the estimates. And I really went to the estimates because it is not only a housing program that is led by the ministry responsible for housing and lands. But before I go there, perhaps I ought to make the point that, and this point has to do with governance. Now, there's a lot of talk about hope. I am not the minister responsible for housing and lands, so I can't speak in detail. I'm sure he will speak in detail. But there's an issue here. Who owns the Hope Company? I believe the government is still the shareholder. And if the government is the sole shareholder, even if it were formed as a private company under the Companies Act, as most companies have to follow the Companies Act, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is still owned by the government of Barbados and by extension the taxpayers. So on the point of governance, it is not that this company is owned by somebody out there in partnership with the government. The government and the minister responsible for housing will have to correct me if I'm wrong, as well as the senior minister. But as far as I know, Hope Inc. is 100% owned by the government of Barbados. And if you have an entity in Barbados and the others, Kwame is one, BTMI is one, another one, sorry, and there are several others, BTII, they are owned by the government of Barbados as the sole shareholder. And the point I want to make about governance is that even if we plaster Hope as a poster child, we also have to remember who owns Hope. So if property or acres were vested in the National Housing Corporation, that too is owned and managed by the government of Barbados. Hope, private company or not, sole shareholder, the government of Barbados. And if these entities are owned by the sole shareholder, the government of Barbados, it therefore means that that entity in particular must be acting on the clear policy, decision, and guidance of the government of Barbados. And I believe that is the case. And like I said, if I am wrong, I will take my seat and the minister responsible for housing and lands will correct me. But that is a clear issue with respect to governance. So it's not that you have Hope Inc. out there doing its own thing, operating as though the government is not the shareholder, or that this is some company owned by several other private shareholders or persons in Barbados. Let the record of Parliament reflect. Let the message go out that Hope is wholly owned by the government of Barbados and therefore is subject to the policy direction of this government. And I wanted to make that point because it's necessary. And like I said, if there are structured arrangements, and there are times when you will have special purpose vehicles for a variety of reasons. We all know it because we've sat here in this parliament for some time. And there's no secret with respect to how we pursue policy decisions, especially with the special purpose vehicles. But Madam Deputy Speaker, the government has done a lot of work in housing in this country. And therefore, I will say to the Honourable Member for St. George South, you don't need to be on the back foot and be defensive. Far from that, I think you should be on the front foot and on the offensive. And the reason for me saying this is because there is a clarion call in this country for housing. And the government has a responsibility to assist in the provision of housing solutions in this country. The private sector will do some, but the government is duty-bound to do it. And as I said, both governments, both administrations have had a long history in building out housing solutions in Barbados. I remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, and you will remember this, because the then chairman of the cabinet represented the people of St. Thomas in this very parliament. And that member of parliament also built out a number of housing solutions in Barbados. And we recall, for example, look when you pass through Dickens and Ferniehurst, when you go through Grisettes, when you go through the Pine, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael South said, when you go through a number of areas in Barbados, you will see housing solutions that were built on agricultural land. There are housing solutions that were built by both administrations. But in particular, during the 1976 to 86 period, when there was a significant build-out of housing in this country. And that is for the record. So the Honourable Member must press on with getting the housing solutions done. Because I too, when I go to my constituency clinic, and when people call me and I return their calls, they're asking me for a housing solution. They are telling me that they're tired of paying rent. They're telling me, especially when they're getting on in age, that they want their own place. And if you have a government that is responding in a positive manner to the requests of the people of Barbados, then I am happy to be associated with that request. But I go further, because the government's record in housing is not only limited to the housing solutions that the Honourable Member for St. George South is adequately and efficiently pushing the agenda for. It goes back to what is happening. If you go to the estimates of expenditure for 2024-2025, you will see that there's sums in there voted for the Rural Development Corporation, and that's at page 22, Madam Deputy Speaker, of the estimates for 2024-25, which is already a document of this House. And if you go to page 37, you will see the vote for the UDC. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I went to the estimates. And when I looked at the estimates and I looked at the vote, I didn't go back to 2018 to take us right through to 2022. I went back and I looked at the vote from our second term, from 2022 to 23. And when you look at the allocation, the vote for 2022-23 for RDC was 9.18 million. The UDC vote was 16 million. When you go to the vote for 2023-24, 5 million and 8.8 million respectively for the RDC and UDC. And when you look at the estimates of expenditure for this year, you have 4.8 and 7.2 million dollars. And as you know, as we collect additional revenue, you add a little more toward the end and you give the RDC more. But when you look at the sum total that we have allocated post-January 2022 election, Mr. Speaker, the government of Barbados has spent $50.98 million. In other words, $51 million in housing solutions in this country. And we can walk around Barbados and we can see, if you're going to rural Barbados, you can see the houses because they are very distinctive. If you come into UDC and you come into the rural in the urban community and the urban areas, you will see what they have done, Mr. Speaker. And a lot of people, including the poor, the disabled, and other people who have not had a chance hitherto to own a decent house in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the Barbados Labour Party government, this government has spent $51 million alone on housing solutions post January 2022. It tells the story, the success story, and all of us who have constituencies, all of us in here who sit representing constituents will know that from time to time we put in requests. In my case, I put in requests for my constituency through the Urban Development Corporation. And I'm happy to say that they have responded. And I'm sure, were it not for sometimes some landlords not giving permission, the figure perhaps would have been double. Because you have, and I want this message to go, the government is prepared to do more. But there are sometimes people who own the land, and sometimes there are clear issues relating to title. And as a result, it is not often, it would be unlawful for the government to do so, and the government obviously has to stay within the law. And if we had issues with titles clean, the RDC and the UDC would be spending more money on housing solutions in Barbados. But if in 3 years, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, I apologize, Madam Deputy Speaker, that you've had an administration rounded off at $51 million on housing solutions. And I can go further. Because this government, as responsible as it continues to be, whenever there's an issue, whenever we have the effects of post-hurricanes in Barbados, it is the Barbados Labour Party government that reaches out and provides solutions, especially housing solutions and repairs to damaged properties post-hurricane events. And that is a statement of fact. You can want to criticize the government sometimes, that perhaps we can go at a faster pace. But in some cases, it is because titles aren't clean. And in other cases, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have situations where oftentimes you don't have enough workers. And that is what we're faced with in Barbados. And the Honourable Member for St. Philip West has facilitated the construction gateway and is doing a fantastic job in response to the shortages that we are experiencing in the construction sector, Madam Deputy Speaker. So this is not a government about a lot of long talk. This is about a government that has recognized that we had to implement the construction gateway to advance the skills and to ensure that we have the appropriate human resource complement and persons with trade so that they can get in there and make some money out of the construction by training through the construction gateway for them to earn money. Madam Deputy Speaker, I even know of a female who has now gone in and doing training to become electrician. And she's not the only one. There are others who are into carpentry, mason, and you name it. So I really have to applaud the Honourable Member for St. Philip West for taking the initiative in recognizing, look, we are likely to have a shortage of skills in these areas, and she forged ahead. It's up to her, Madam Deputy Speaker, to tell the success story of the construction gateway for the country. But I know of the good works that she's doing with respect to the construction gateway. And the more skills, the more persons we have trained, the more human resources we will have within the country to help us not only with housing construction, but also commercial construction. And I really didn't want to delay the House on Julie, but I had to make my intervention in respect of this matter. And if I want to play a little politics too, Madam Deputy Speaker, I could play a little politics too. Because I can also tell the leader of the opposition that if he would cast his mind back, it's not his fault, and I don't blame you. But if he were to cast his mind back to the IDB loan, and if the government of the day, not this government, but the DLP administration, when they had the IDB loan to refurbish hundreds of houses in Castle and Greenfields and all through the city, what we commonly refer to as across the constituency of the city of Bridgetown. If I were to remind him about that, I would want him to say, were that loan taken advantage of at the time, the demand and the pressure for housing in Barbados would not have been as intense as it is now, because a lot of those people who were in that area would have benefited from improved housing in the city of Bridgetown. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not going to get into trouble with you, and I know my time is almost at an end. But I felt it was necessary to have an intervention in this debate to assure the honourable member for St. George South that he should maintain his discipline. He knows the government's protocols and the confines with which he has to work in, and continue to do so. And I want to encourage him not to be on the back foot. He needs to be on the front foot and press the gas and move on with the housing solutions of Barbados, so that when the people who get the keys and they move into the houses, they will say, I thank the honourable member for St. George South and the Barbados Labour Party for ensuring that I get, as Bajans like to say, a piece of this rock. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member, Vice Chair West.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, for an opportunity to make a brief intervention into this debate. Needless to say, and I heard many people talk about who was on the front foot and who was on the back foot and who needs to be on the back foot. Well, let me tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, the member for St. George South was on the front foot and hitting sixes today in this honourable chamber. On the front foot and hitting sixes, because his record is stellar and nobody could challenge it. But I have now come to the crease to support him as well. And I am going to support him strong and full. And unlike the member for St. Michael West Central, I am going to be playing enough politics today. Enough politics. But let me start with a little lesson from the good book. The clerk of Parliament asked me what lesson I can speak from the good book for the previous speech. I didn't have one. I looked for one. I couldn't find one. But I found one for this particular debate. And the honourable member for St. Michael West Central talked about owning a piece of the rock. Well, let me talk about building your house on the rock. Matthew 7:24-27. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. You could not want a more apt piece of scripture to define this today. I'm going to start with a few little things. You know, I heard the Honourable Member say, oh, you took Boleyn's agricultural station and you've decided to put houses there. And I laughed to myself and I said, you know, the longer you spend in this honourable chamber, the more things you hear repeated over and over again. You know, there's a saying that if you do not know your history, you are doomed to repeat it. But let me, Honourable Member, tell you something about the history of the Democratic Labour Party and about agricultural stations. The Democratic Labour Party made a decision to build a housing solution structure at a place called the Grotto. We all heard about it just now in the constituency of St. Michael South. Well, I know the Grotto, Madam Deputy Speaker. I grew up in Dayton Road. The only distance from Dayton Road to the Grotto is Paddock Road. That is all. It must be 150 meters. That is it. I know the Grotto. The Barbados Agricultural Society is still at the Grotto because the Grotto was agricultural station and agricultural land. The same agricultural land that the Democratic Labour Party took up and built a housing development on. Well, I can see the shade houses in my mind's eye today. They were plastic, polythene-covered shade houses used to develop various strains of seeds for agriculture at the Grotto. But the same Democratic Labour Party, who he now represents, took up agricultural land and built at the Grotto. But you know what? According to the Honourable Member, it is immoral to take up agricultural land. It is politically irresponsible to take up agricultural land. It is wrong to take up agricultural land, and it is a sin to take up agricultural land. Did I leave out anything? No. That is what the Honourable Member said, and I encouraged him to say and repeat it, and he did for the benefit of everybody. All of these wrong things, but his party did it at the very same Grotto, where Barbados Agricultural Society corporate office still now is. But I go further. The Honourable Member for St. George South, who hit 6 after 6 after 6, said that the Democratic Labour Party built 1,300 houses when they were in office. You know, Madam Deputy Speaker, that 500 of those 1,300 was built on what we call ribbon developments. What do you mean by ribbon developments? Ribbon developments are areas where there is a housing opportunity, but you don't have to put in any infrastructure because the road and the electricity and the water is already there. But you would not believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, that those same ribbon developments, for those 500 houses, where the Democratic Labour Party took the easy way out and built where they didn't have to put in road, not like the Honourable Member for St. George South, where at Dodds North he had to put in road and services. At Vespera, he had to put in roads and services. At Poole, he put in roads and services. The Democratic Labour Party took the easy way out for 500 of those 1,300 houses, where they didn't have to put in any services, they didn't have to put in any road, they didn't have to put in any electricity, they didn't have to put in any water. But you know what is most interesting, Madam Deputy Speaker? All on agricultural land again. The member that said to take up agricultural land is immoral. It is politically irresponsible. It is wrong, and it is a sin. 500 of those houses, I can tell you the places. Brighton in St. George. That agricultural land, but that's the breadbasket of the country. Henley in St. John, Cherry Grove, Poole, Branchbury St. Joseph, Clifton St. Philip, And even Mount Poya in St. Lucie, agricultural land, agricultural land, agricultural land, agricultural land. But yet still, the honourable member says, immoral, politically irresponsible, wrong, and a sin. But how? But you know, I guess I'm going to put down to naivety. Politically naive to not recognize that our administration by administration have had to use agricultural land to develop housing. Have had to. And you know, the honourable members reminded me of the parish land St. Philip development. Now that was my first forte into taking a video that went viral. I understand by the time I looked at it, just before election, it had 86,000 views or something like that. I don't remember the number, but enough views for a country like Barbados. And the reason that I took that video, Madam Deputy Speaker, and circulated it, is because they had built 100-odd houses. They built, and I heard the young member talk about tall grass at 6 Roads. But there may be building supplies at 6 Roads waiting to go into houses, and we get that because you have to store building supplies somewhere. But they're not houses, they're building supplies. But let me tell you, at parish land, it wasn't building supplies, it was houses, 100+ houses laid empty with more than tall grass, with vines and bats living in the ceiling. Bats living in the ceiling. Madam Deputy Speaker, when we came to office, we had to fix that too. All of the houses were sorted, and we made a large proportion of them available to single mothers. Single mother program that was put in place in parish land for single mothers from all over Barbados. This is what this administration did because we care about people and we empowering people so that they get a piece of the rock. This is the important work that the member for St. George South has done. And I can go further on it. You know, the honourable member talk about the small contractor. Well, I was the person when the, Contractor and Artisans Association, were there the people that worked at Vespera? The small contractors, they petitioned us, we met with them, we said, okay, you get these houses. Small contractors did the work at Vespera, Contractors and Artisans Association of Barbados, and worked there, and did the same at Clifton too, and at River Crescent, and further, they're the ones that do the UDC and RDC houses. All the houses that the member for St. Michael Western talked about, the 50 million, but those are all small contractors. All small contractors that work for UDC. UDC and RDC does not employ large contractors, but they only employ small contractors. No, let me just say that is straight naivety. But I can go further. Mr. Deputy Speaker. Let me say, right, that when the houses are built, the houses are sold, and the money goes back to the Housing Credit Fund. That's the first thing. The first thing. Houses are built, houses are sold, the money goes back to the Housing Credit Fund. But you know what it's there for? What's it called? The Housing Credit Fund. What's it to do? To extend opportunities to build houses for the people of Barbados. So the fund is functioning as it should. It's not functioning in any clandestine manner. That is exactly what it is there for. To provide money to build houses for the people of Barbados. When the houses are built, the houses are sold, the money that they sold for goes back to the Housing Credit Fund, then you draw down again, and you build more houses again, and you do the same like how a revolving fund works. That is what you do. And I can go further. In addition to what Hope is doing with that, in addition to the use of the money from the Housing Credit Fund, They're also using stage payments from the banks. So it means that you come to Hope with your mortgage certificate. You say, I am qualified for this amount of money, and you get your allotment, and then as you build, you get stage payments. That's how all developers do it. As you build, you get foundation, you get a payment at foundation. And the bank supplements that. And then you get a payment at ring beam, whatever the stages are. And the bank makes the stage payments. That way you don't have the great dependency for going forward on the Housing Credit Fund, because the Housing Credit Fund only has so much money in it. So I support wholeheartedly the work that the Minister for St. George South is doing, and all of us do. You know, Madam Deputy Speaker, building houses is very difficult. And they talked about how the Democratic Labour Party took the lazy way out by building where the infrastructure already was. But let me tell you, building a development when you have to build the infrastructure as well is much, much harder than when you just have to build a house. I'm telling you. Because when you have to build the infrastructure, you have to have the road designed. You have to have the road cut. You have to have the road prepared. You have to have the water in. You have to have the natural gas in if you have it in a natural gas location. You have to have the poles in to take the electricity. You have to have the internet cable in as well. Then you have to have the curbs, the slippers, the drainage, the wells. All sorts of things go into a development, and that is just the road. And then you got to turn around and build the houses. And that is what the member of St. George South has been doing and has been able to do. And I commend the work that he has done. And I know the members in this honorable chamber recognize the hard work that he has done to get us to where we are and the number of houses. And I want to go further, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government recognizes we have housing problems with overcrowding. And we have set about ways and finding ways to fix those problems. What we have done is, yes, traditional build is one way. But traditional build takes time. So what should we do? Let us look outside and look for new technologies and new ways to build. New ways that may be faster, better, fire resistant, more resistant, cooler, and that's what we've done. Why should we remain stuck in the old ways? We say no. We say as time and technology progresses, we want to leapfrog technologies. We want to see what is next. The honorable member spoke about the future. Well, we are looking to the future by looking for new ways and new technological developments. And that is exactly what we're doing. And we're going to partner with people to get those developments going for two reasons. Reason number one is better, stronger, faster. Reason number two, it exposes our workforce to new technologies so they have a skill that they can export to other areas and other regions. And by exposing our people, it means that they have skills that are marketable throughout the region, if not throughout the world. So, Madam Speaker, I recognize that the time is short. I want to say one last thing, two last things about the particular resolution. The Bullens Agricultural Station was actually in what we call the urban corridor. Physical development plan, already passed by this House. It shows very clearly Holders Hill is part of the urban corridor. It is not in what is designated agricultural land. Not like Brighton in the bread basket that the Democratic Labour Party did. Not like that. It is designated urban corridor, and it has housing developments around it fit for development. But in addition to the housing being done there, Children's Trust is building at no cost to the government of Barbados, just for us providing the land. They are developing a home for the children of this country who are in homes who are over 11 and above. So it's a new kind of home, over 11 and above. at no cost. And you want to hear how much that going to cost, that donation of a building going to cost? The estimated cost is not 5 million. It's not 8 million. It's not 10 million. It's not 12 million. It's a $15 million development that will be put there so that the children of Barbados can benefit. Who could scoff at that? You remember say he's not going to be softened by it. I am softened by it, and I am heartened by it, because it shows that there are people out there that have such confidence and such faith in the people of Barbados that they want to give the opportunity to our children so that they too can have an opportunity in this land of ours. So this is a win on many, many levels. It's a win for those who will benefit from the houses. It's a win for those who worked in constructing the houses because they get a skill. It is a win for the children because the children's home is going there. It is a win for the people of Barbados. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm cognizant of the time and I'm obliged.
Madam Deputy Speaker, let me wrap up first by thanking those members who so eloquently spoke in this debate on this side. Member for St. Michael West Central, member for St. Michael South, and the member for Christchurch West. I also would thank the member for Christchurch South for his effort. I am honorable, and I wouldn't want to stand up and say certain things about him that I don't truly mean, just for the sake of speaking. But at the end of the day, the honorable member must understand there's a philosophical divide here, difference between his side and our side as it relates to housing. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we recognize that this administration has focused on home ownership among ordinary Barbadians. I want to repeat that. There's been a focus by this administration on home ownership. We believe strongly that rent money is dead money. We believe that one of the ways to lift ordinary Barbadians out of poverty, those people from Ellerton, from Grisettes, from the Pine, from St. Philip, from Crab Hill, one of the ways is through home ownership. Because when you own a home, you have an asset to leverage. So that when the last administration kicked down the ladder for those students who were at university, kicked down the ladder, and the honorable member for Christchurch South spoke about that on our behalf. I recall you sitting here, honorable member for Christchurch South, and you chastised the former government for kicking down the ladder. We spoke about that many times. Because the ordinary man and woman, parents of children, they were not able to leverage any asset. They were not able to go to the bank and say, I have a home, I have an asset, something that appreciates. The honorable member for St. Michael West Central and the member for St. Peter, they would agree. They work in that sector. They're trained men in the accounting area and finance field, where they understand when something appreciates as opposed to depreciates. You can leverage it. It's not like a car that depreciates. Every minute you turn the key. But every minute you do a little bit of home improvement, your asset improves, and you can leverage that asset to send your children to university. And that is the difference between this government's policy and the last administration. The last administration prized itself on building 1,400 rental units. Rental units. What level of ownership and empowerment have you given to the ordinary man when you continue to build rental units at such an astronomical rate, $650 per square foot? And utilizing the taxpayers' money, there's a difference in policy as it relates to housing between the last administration and this administration. The liquidity within the banking sector. We have begun to form partnerships with the banks through various stakeholder consultations and meetings, led ably by the member for Christchurch West, led ably by our esteemed Prime Minister, brought the banks to the table. Let's utilize the liquidity in this banking system to provide mortgages for our ordinary man and woman in this country. And it has been happening. You go now and you assess the mortgage certificates from the lending institutions, over 4,000 mortgage certificates approved through lending institutions that the ordinary man can go and get a mortgage to build a home, to come and say, hey, listen, whether it is a Jurvilla house, and I'm going to get to those, whether it is a traditional build, whether it is a like gauge steel house, whether it is a proposed autoclave aerated concrete paneling house that's going to keep it cool. Those are the options available to the ordinary man and woman. Never before in the history of this country has a government sought to create the level of innovative platform that we have by research to provide affordable housing for our people. Never once in the history of this country has a government sought to cap the price of land to provide affordable housing for the ordinary man and woman in this country. This government did it. And we have capped the price of land at $12 a square foot. Gone are the days when a government can exploit the ordinary man and woman in this country. And when you do that, you disadvantage the children. And you know what happened? The crime that you speak about within communities begin to escalate because people continue to fight for space, to sleep at night, to do their homework. And what they do, to migrate to the blocks. And they begin to engage in activities that are not so wholesome. Something we refer to in the village as bad company. Honourable member for Christchurch South, you know that very well. When we allow our children, we don't provide the environment for them to be educated, to sit and read. You love to read. But you always have a space that you can sit and read. Miss Thorne that gone to the great beyond, you know that very well. You're from a good family. But you will sit in here and want people to believe that this government is disadvantaging the ordinary man and woman as it relates to housing. I'm going to get to the land use policy just now, you know. I ain't wrapping up because the time is getting late. Not only have we capped the price of land, services as well. And we recognize that in an effort to push home ownership among a certain category of persons earning between less than $1,500, between $1,500 a month and $2,000, we call it de-risking them. We recognize you may talk about letting each man fight for his own, but we recognize we have to put system in place to de-risk these people. And if government has to cap the price of land to make sure that the ordinary man and the ordinary woman working for $1,200 and $1,300 a month, sorry, $2,000 a month and $2,500 a month can own a home, we do it. We do it. Because when they own a home, we have engaged in rent-to-own homes in this country, the rent-to-own policy. But allow persons who cannot on day one, member for St. Michael West Central, who cannot go to the bank on day one to get a mortgage. They can begin by renting to own and put some skin in the game. And when they have created enough flesh and skin in the game, then they go to the lending institution. But they are in their homes, renting to own it. That's this government's policy, which is different from the last administration. So it is not just about owning a piece of this rock, it is about owning a home in this country so that you can leverage that asset to create another asset, get another asset. From one house to two houses, we have to empower people and enfranchise them and tell them, listen, one house is not enough for ordinary black people with 3 and 4 children. You can own more than one. Rent money is dead money, and that's the philosophy of this government. We have pushed home ownership in our housing policy. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have also recognized, and I heard the member for St. Michael South, we have had the debate, the member for St. James North. 10% of our public housing goes to persons with disability. You have seen it, you have lived it with us, member for St. James North. This government's philosophy on housing is all inclusive. Gone are the days when you're taking somebody who's disabled and just tell them, look, go in that rental unit. We are empowering them as well, member for St. James North, to own a home too. And that's the philosophy. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I heard the honourable member. I don't want to be too long in my wrap-up. I heard the honourable member. He spoke about national housing and not using national housing anymore and going to hope only. But I thought it was self-explanatory when I said that National Housing Corporation they continue to engage in joint venture partnerships, public-private partnerships, where the government, I come to Parliament, vests land in the National Housing Corporation. This land is then utilized by a private developer who develops the land, put in the services, and build the homes. Again, utilizing the banking sector, persons qualify for mortgages, and they're able then, through drawdowns, to move into these homes as the stages progress from foundation to roof to closing up of the houses. So there is a space as we build out housing in this sector for National Housing Corporation. Hope was formed, and I will explain again to the member for ownership providing energy, and thank you, member for St. Michael West Central. The government is the only shareholder within Hope, the sole shareholder. But government has given Hope the space to go there on the market to seek their own financing as well as utilizing the Housing Credit Fund. And the member for Christchurch West alluded to the fact that the monies are borrowed from the Housing Credit Fund and they're repaid. That is what it is for. At an interest rate, you forgot that? So there's no abuse of taxpayers' money. You take the money from the Housing Credit Fund to capitalize and to start the business. And as you build the homes, you repay the Housing Credit Fund. And it is recycled at an interest rate. So this thing about utilizing funds and abusing funds and wasting funds, I said earlier, mistakes were made. And he wants to suggest that I am the poster boy. Well, I ain't a poster boy for nobody. If you're a poster boy for the DLPA, sorry. I ain't a poster boy for anybody. I went to school just like you. Madam Deputy Speaker, sorry. I ain't a poster boy for anybody. I am schooled just like you, the member for Christchurch South. You're schooled in law and I'm schooled in engineering. I'm not a poster boy. I understand that we, as a government, and we're a team. And when one makes a mistake, all make the mistake. And that's how we go unified as a cabinet and as a parliamentary group in support of each other. You were here. You probably were not unified, that's why you left. You didn't feel as if you were part of us. So if I have to come to the public to explain what has gone wrong on a project and what will be done to correct the project, that's my mandate, that's my role as Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. And when I was Minister of Commerce and Business, I did the same thing. And when I was Minister of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment, I did the same thing on behalf of the government. So if mistakes are made, and that's about leadership, I am trained in leadership as well, sir. Highly trained too. You're trained in law, you'll want to get training as a black man. Luther and Raldo were able to give me that necessary the opportunity to get a student loan so that I could get the necessary training, just like how Mrs. Thorne and Mr. Thorne give you that training. And I respect them for it. You're a black man. Huh? Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, I say. I said Luther and Raldo are my parents. I can call them by their first name. Luther and Raldo Sutherland, Morelda Sutherland to be exact. That you met, the old man that you met. And asking him if I was in the house hiding when you went to Ellerton. Madam Deputy Chair. Yeah, he was up there. But the reality here is that the shift from rental at this point has to be driven home to ownership in this country. Home ownership has to be driven home as we close this debate. It has to be driven home. The ability of a government to recognize where the challenges are for the ordinary man and the ordinary woman to own a home in this country and decide that we will bring the playing field level, we will cap services, that the price of land per square foot shouldn't go beyond a certain amount, is creating policy that will benefit the persons lower in the spectrum in terms of salary or wages, take-home salary and wages. So we cap services. We cap the price of land. These are the things that we did to ensure that persons working for $3,000 and paying rent of $1,600 and $1,500 for a two-bedroom house. Indeed, within a 2-year period, when we believe we would have gone beyond, Madam Deputy Speaker, beyond the 1323 over the 3-year period. And we have utilized the technology available to us in terms of home building, house construction, to reduce the time it takes to build a home. And that is what we are focusing on now, so we can get scale and persons into these homes faster. So that's why we travel to look at the technology that is available to us, like gauge steel structures and autoclave aerated cement. I'm going to wrap up now, sir. I'm going to wrap up now. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, the use of the banking sector to lend to persons for mortgages, that is what we are doing. Now I want to let the country know, we went about this task systematically, and I have here a document, Madam Deputy Speaker. I term it, and we termed it, the silent resolution. The silent revolution, sorry. I have it here. It's a revolution, sorry. I have it here. Where we went from parish to parish. We started in the north of the island, and we went to the south. We went to the east. We went to the west. Every parish we went to and identified lands, utilizing the planners, trained persons within the public service, to see how we can get our numbers up. And I'm proud to report that the acreage that we have here, we have listed, this is only the public sector chart. The acreage that we have can give us over 16,000 units without interfering with prime agricultural land. And I heard the Honourable Member. But I live in a constituency that they call the breadbasket. I'm from the constituency and I represent it, the breadbasket. And I've seen the last administration, when you're traveling east from Boarded Hall Police Station heading to St. Philip, within 400 meters from the police station heading east to St. Philip, it is a development called Lower Graves. I have traveled to Lower Graves. That was a yam ground, a potato ground, a cassava ground. I traveled to Lower Graves with my parents. At that time, my father had a Suzuki. He owned a Suzuki van. We were not rich. A small Suzuki van member for Christchurch South. And I was taught how to dig yams and potatoes from that ground. And I lived to see the day, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm just using one example in the breadbasket, that ground, the name of the housing development or estate is now Valley Vista in there. And I greet people there on a regular basis, and I often let them know that this used to be a yam ground, a potato ground, a cassava ground. And the last administration, so if the Honourable Member, I heard the member for St. Michael South, he said to you, you got to clean your own eyes first before you clean others. That land was sold. We called it then prime agricultural land. It was not like Bullins. It was prime agricultural land.
In production.
In production. That was sold under the Democratic Labour Party. I mean, I love the people in there, and I have to, to the point that if you go there now, there's a section that was left, they call it a green space. But if rain falls for 15 minutes, it is flooded. And I'm working with the people to address that area. Because I know it was a cane ground, it was a yam ground, it was a potato ground. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honorable member must understand. You know, there is a saying that all land in this country has been agricultural land. If you speak to any good planner, he's going to tell you all land has been agricultural land. All land was agricultural land. Member for St. James North, you know that. So don't let us come in here and try to fool the public, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we're taking up agricultural land to build housing on. All the land has been classified as agricultural land, but that's why we have a planning division within government that advises us as to how we should take land, how we should utilize the land. And the member for Christchurch South, you are not here, but I want to end again by reading this note for you on Bullings, the note from the Director of Planning and his team. This site is located just outside the Greater Bridgetown area, which has Holders Hill Road at its northern limit. It is also located within the urban boundary, where the objective is to consolidate development around existing infrastructure and services in order to help safeguard the larger tracts of agricultural land outside of this urban corridor. The Director of Planning notes the importance of urban agriculture. However, in this instance, the Ministry of Agriculture is decommissioning this facility and relocating to the Hope St. Lucie. The facility, Bullings Agricultural Station, was decommissioned and relocated, including the staff. The Holders' site has therefore become ripe for infill development, and the Director strongly supports, I will repeat this, the Director of Planning strongly supports the proposed acquisition for the purpose of residential development and at preferred densities in the form of duplex and quadruplex and single units, mixed use. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to take my leave by saying to the public and to this chamber, the housing program of this government is alive. We have identified the various sites. We have sought planning approval, and we have engaged project managers who have come on board to help build up this housing sector within a reasonable time frame. But more importantly, we have empowered the people of this country. The people of this country are excited about owning their own homes at the announcement by the Prime Minister of the housing policy in 2022. Persons who never thought they had an opportunity to own a home are now excited. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we intend to continue within the next few weeks and months, opening sites at Clifton, where we have built 11 Joe Villa hardwood houses, opening sites at Vesper Gardens, and the member will want to split hairs about whether the member for Christchurch South, whether having keys and being in the house. When you have discharged your duty of signing your mortgage, you did it, member for Christchurch South. I don't know if you moved in the same day when you signed your mortgage and you got the keys, or if you went by mommy and St. Michael to spend time. But I know when I got my keys, I moved in. But there are persons, once you get your keys from the institution, you own the home. So if you want to go down there and camp out every night to see whether somebody in the house or whether by the mother, go and camp out. And if you want to question the numbers, I don't lie in this chamber. There's no need to lie. There's no need to lie in the number of homeowners at Vesper. That project is near completion other than snagging some houses. I'm not coming in here to lie to the public. So if you want to camp out night after night after night I ain't live too far from there. I would still get a glass of water if you want to camp out to see whether 65 persons in the house or 44, or who got the keys, or who turned the keys. Come on, man. Let's stop nitpicking and be serious about home ownership in this country.
That's right.
Then we go from Vesper Gardens, we go to Bullins, Floralis Gardens, the Latin, flowers and flora, the Latin word, to open the 28 homes there this year. And then we go to Sargents. The housing program is active and is alive. This government is on a mission to enfranchise all classes in this country, to transition from rental to a policy of ownership. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I will continue on my mission to support the government's mandate to providing affordable housing for every last citizen in this country. And with those words, Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg that this resolution now pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say nay. You think the ayes have it? This resolution is now passed.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it has been a long but very, very good day today for the people of Barbados. And I would now ask that we take the adjournment and that we resume our sit-ins on December 10th, Tuesday at 10 a.m., the week after next. Tuesday, December 10th at 10 a.m., week after next.
All remember. And there's adjourn. This honorable chamber's business for the 10th in the morning.
Yes.
All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. This business stands adjourned until December